So much has changed in the world just in the last 10 years. Like, so much has changed. Tools available, expectation of customers, cost of things. Like, we can't run at the same cost levels. We can't run at the same speed levels. You've got to use new tools and new ideas and new ways. You have to shift expectations.
Constructing your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
Guys, welcome back to Construct Your Life. This is Austin Linney here, and I have the pleasure of having Mr. Josh Schultz in the house. How are you doing, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Austin.
Man, I appreciate you coming on, dude. So much to learn about you. I don't know much about you besides what you do now, but I want to kind of dig in, and if you want to tell the guests kind of where you started and where you are now, and we'll just kind of get rolling.
Yeah, so started as upstate New York, Syracuse, and nothing of note, not particularly smart, not a well-connected family. Actually, Syracuse is a pretty poor town. A lot of manufacturing has left there since the 50s. So it's economically depressed. It's also very gray. So you get about, it feels like a roughly straight 9 months. You get a lot of gray called the Syracuse gray. It's the way the weather patterns come off the Great Lakes. And what you end up having is a kind of almost this citywide culture of depression. So everybody's like, oh, nothing ever gets better. It comes across, and it's like a famous local thing. The Syracuse comments are the worst place to live because they talk about any business that opens up, oh, they won't last long. And so that was kind of where I grew up, was this limiting in almost every way area up in upstate New York. And then from that, had a dad who kind of expanded my thinking through force and will, and owned a small fastener company, which I swore I'd never work for. And through a series of events, left finance and ended up leaving New York City and going to work for him. And that's kind of where my life finally started to make sense to me. And started to work with him, learned operations, dug in. And then from there is kind of where most people know me. Started to travel a lot more, learn a lot more, meet a lot of new people. And I'm just a sponge for information. So basically, I'm just like an amalgamation of all these things I've learned from other people and experiences and problems. My 20s had a ton of issues and problems, everything from personal issues and depression and bipolar and all that, all the way through to friends and losing cultures and stuff. And so that, I think, helped me get a little stronger and figure some things out and realize that you can live life on accident and you can have a lot of problems, or you can start to get purposeful about it, and you can avoid a lot of those problems by just thinking about who you are and how you act and stuff.
No, I love that. And currently where I'm living at the moment, it's very gray here. Most of the big, this is where oil started. Most of those big companies have left over the last 50, 60 years. So I know that mentality that you're talking about. And I'm sure, like, you live in Austin now.
Oh yeah.
And,
different.
Austin's the city of, like, hey, we're just going to keep building it. And funny enough about Austin, lived there on and off for 10 years. I thought it was dead like 9 years ago. And then every year it's picked up since then. And so, what a juxtaposition, I would imagine, to get away from that kind of like woe is me attitude to an optimistic. Did that change, like, internally how you saw, like, business and yourself? Or was that like, because people don't really talk about environment enough, right? You buying some business in the middle of nowhere, or you're moving, and they don't really focus. I know, at least I didn't in my younger days, how much my environment mattered.
Yeah, 100%. I actually just got a wake-up call on it over holiday break. So I haven't been back much. I think I went back once to visit my family for a few days. But when I was there, I was constantly, I thought I was banging out the walls, right? So I had friends that were leaving. I was trying to learn from them. I was traveling to Colorado. I was traveling to California. I was visiting businesses, and I'm like, man, I'm really growing. And it wasn't until I left. I've been in Austin for about 4 years now. I've made a lot of friends here that are doing all these interesting things. And just by being here, almost like osmosis, you pick up on, hey, there's buildings always being built. New businesses are always opening. Very few times do you see them closing. Cranes are downtown. The conversations you hear are, even when businesses close, it's like, well, it's okay. We're going to open up another one. We'll figure this out. and you just talk to people and you realize how much your mindset changes from just being soaked in that different culture. My friends are all doing interesting things, and you realize that the world is full of interesting opportunities if you're open to them. Or when I was in Syracuse, I was like, there's only 4 things to do. I better hunker down and focus. And not that I'm not focused now, but it's just it almost takes the pressure off of, hey, there's a lot of areas to look at. There's a lot of creativity out there. And so when I went back for the holidays, I was driving around, and in my mind, I was just like, if I lived here, like, where would I even go on a Saturday morning? What would I do? Who would I call if I moved back here? And I was just kind of running myself through this kind of mental exercise. And I realized I wouldn't, my life is so much richer now. The people, the conversations I have. And then you think about like the compounding, right? So if I have those great conversations every day for 4 years straight, I didn't realize how much that was notching me up a little bit at a time until I went back to Syracuse and kind of compared it. And it's like, oh, my life has grown so much. I literally outgrew this town, not in a bad way. I still love Syracuse and a lot of things about it, but I just realized I wouldn't be the same person if I went back. I don't know if I could go back, even if I wanted to.
Guys, let me take a minute to tell you about my buddies over at Lead Hub, Ben and Aaron, the best humans I know. Not only are they amazing at marketing for trade companies, but Ben started his HVAC company in his garage, sold it for multi-million-dollars. So when this guy talks, I listen. When we took over Dietz Mechanical, we had 22 reviews in 22 years. In 7 short months, we went from 22 reviews to 107. We went from a 4.2 to a 4.7. We tripled our Facebook presence and we tripled our calls. If you're an HVAC, plumbing, electric, landscaping company, and you're looking for a no BS approach to marketing, you're looking for people who have done it before, you got to go to leadhub.net. Anytime I meet a young person and they ask me what they should do, I said, you should go somewhere.
Pick
way
somewhere
away.
For sure.
Like way away. Like I remember we went on a one-way trip to Spain, Portugal, and France, and I had a night with a group of 10 people, and I speak barely any Spanish. And we spent 12 hours together at his wife's birthday. And I had the best time ever, and I don't really know what they were talking about. But that experience has always stuck with me, right? And so, like, anytime I meet a young person, they're like, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, well, I think you should find a job. You can work from your laptop. I think you should work your butt off, get around good people, and travel and get to know these different things. I was talking about with somebody today, the more and more, and you're in manufacturing, so you probably see it more than most. The more and more I get into the business world, the more and more I realize there's a million ways to make a ton of money. There's a million ways to impact people. There's so many people that have great businesses doing wild stuff, and it doesn't have to be the traditional way that you see it. That's what I think we forgot, is there's so many opportunities out there.
One of my favorite things to do when I travel is go a little outside. I've done this for almost 10, 12 years. Started doing it when I was in doing sales for my business back in Syracuse. And what I would drive around, and you just see all these businesses. You go to these industrial centers where they just spin up, rows, and there might be manufacturing, but also just sometimes legal and accounting. And one of the coolest thoughts I always have is you pass hundreds of buildings in this small town that I didn't even know existed. Some, let's say 2 hours outside of Syracuse, or 3 hours outside of Kansas City. And you just see business after business after business. And you think about it, that little place I've never heard of, in the city I'd never heard of, there's hundreds of them, are all paying somebody's lifestyle and multiple employees in them. And that you just have to think about how vast the economy really is when you constantly just drive down and just see all these businesses. This guy does powder coating. This guy only does high-end imported cars. Like, that's all he does in this small town that you wouldn't even think had any imported cars. And that's enough to fund his lifestyle and 3 guys that work there. And you just keep going through, and you just realize, like, you see the niches and the creativity. And so I love doing that. Just remember, there's lots of ways to make a buck. They're not easy. Like, they're all hard, all hard work. But there's lots of ideas out there. And the more that you learn about other ones, the more you can then fold those back on yourself. So, he's not selling direct. He's actually getting the vendor to pay him. That's interesting. How could I use that idea and work with my vendors to somehow get a rebate to then work with my customers at a lower price point? And again, you just sharpens you. You just get sharper and sharper the more you expose yourself to this. And then back to what you said. So if you can move somewhere where, like, there's so much going on, you're exposing yourself to so many new ideas, just compounding, and you compound that for years, and you're a totally different person with a different mental model and frameworks and pattern recognition in your brain, that you can literally come up with ideas that you wouldn't have been able to come up with a couple of years earlier.
I met a guy who ran a big industrial fund, ex-Air Force guy out of San Francisco, pilot. And what they do is they find a business that's successful. That business needs cash. They rent it. They buy out the business. The business rents it back from them for 8 years, and they can buy themselves back, right? And he was walking me through all of his businesses that they have. They have so much stuff, Kansas City, everywhere. And he said, you know that felt that's in the glove box of the car? He's like, I have a company that does that. Just that. Like that
Just
little
that,
spot.
yeah.
And he was like, it does like I'm like, and you just like those conversations. And that to me is X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. There's a guy on there, gas business guy, like killing it in gas. I'm reading his stuff. I'm like, I never even like thought about this. Like,
Yeah.
And I love that exploring of the minds, and you've traveled a ton. And so, what you're in manufacturing, you're in operations big time now. You're working on bringing back, the foundries and all that stuff. What did you do before you got into that as a career, and then what brought you into this?
Yeah, I'll give you some shallow dives, and then we can go deep wherever you want.
Okay.
So I started in finance. That was what I did a lot of. I was the 10-year-old who was getting all the 10Ks delivered to the house. I had stacks of them. My parents thought I was crazy. I would read them. I would model them. I would use Excel, when I was 12. And I started building models. So by the time I had gone to college, I had probably built thousands of cash flow models, literally thousands. They weren't all good. They weren't all complex. They probably weren't accurate, but I was giving it my best shot. I was doing profitability. I was doing valuations. Started to get into trading a bit. Had CFA 1 and 2 by the time I was even done with undergrad. And as I got into that world, it was 2007, 2008 as I was coming out of school. And so basically everybody went on lockdown for hiring, and I didn't come from the city. I didn't have any connections. I didn't have any connections in Syracuse. Syracuse is not a finance place. It's, you got a couple of local financial advisors and that's it. And so I really struggled with finance, working in finance, finding a good job that I could utilize my skills and explode. I was also extremely selfish, and I didn't understand how the world worked, I guess is probably the best way to put it. So I thought it was all about knowledge. And I figured if I was the smartest, I could get any job I wanted. And the reality is, and even as I hire now, I know this to be very true. I'm going to hire people that I want to work with every day. So even if you're not the smartest, but I can get along with you and we can hash out problems. Basically, if I don't want to be in a car with you for 5 hours, or I can't, like if I'm going to tell you to fly a separate flight, then we probably shouldn't be hiring you, because I want to, we're going to spend a lot of time together working.
Yeah.
And so, excuse me. So there, I wasn't likable. I didn't have any skills. I didn't have any hobbies. All I did was read. All I did was learn. All I did was school. I was so dialed in that I was the most boring person ever. Looking back, I know exactly why I didn't get hired. I was dull. And so there was a number of other reasons why I failed out, all my own doing. So I just decided I wasn't going to push this anymore. The final clincher was 2008. Finance was about, I think, 25% of GDP. Whenever an industry or a sector gets that to be that large, you usually hit what's called a generational consolidation. So I did a lot of finance history, years of it. And so I knew that it was going to be 40 years to fully shake out, or thereabouts. And I just didn't want to that's my working career. I don't want to spend my entire working career working on this consolidating thing where if you had an uncle, or if you were already in the game or had experience, again, great people, but I didn't have Ivy League education. I just didn't have any of the edges. And so player edge, right? I reassessed at that point, and I decided to go back home and left Manhattan. And at the point, I got my graduate degree to give me 2 years to figure out what to do. And in that, my dad asked me to come work with him. And I was like, well, I have nothing else to do. This sounds horrible. And he goes, just come for a summer and help me. So I helped him for the summer, and I fell in love with it, man. I fell in love with blue collar workers. I fell in love with holding parts in your hand. I fell in love with manufacturing. I started visiting them to help them with issues that they were having with our products. I loved walking the floors. Man, I loved everything about it. I love the problems, all the math. I love the math of finance. And so I thought I was going to miss that, but modeling supply chain and all this stuff, I found my thing and I dove in head first, ended up working with him full time, ended up starting my own business. We grew them side by side and eventually merged them. And so I had been to, all the low cost provider countries. I lived in Mexico for a while. I lived in China for a while. We owned a facility. I started a facility in Mexico actually in 2015 to operate that and live down there to start that. And then just kind of grew that thing. And then we sold it in 2019, about a month before COVID hit. And so we sold that out. I worked for that PE firm for about a year. I had always wanted to, or the PE firm platform company that bought us. I worked for them. And I'd always wanted to be involved in PE until about 2 weeks into actually working with PE. And I realized it's a bunch of, I call them Excel managers. They just manage by Excel. There's very little reality of how things work. It's crazy how educated these guys are and still just not understanding the impact of certain decisions. And I just didn't want any part of it. And I've heard the same from a number of others. And so I just wanted to get back into small business. It took me about a year, and I finally met a guy named Reg Zeller, who's my partner and pretty much everything now. And he's got a lot of the same mentality I do. He comes from the opposite end. He comes from corporate, doesn't like how they do things. And so, we're buying manufacturing. We're starting in foundries, and we're trying to run them a little differently, where people matter, pay matters. We make an impact, we're profitable, and just rethinking everything from how do the phones work, and the normal way is not profitable. You can't just take the model and their usual business playbook. You've got to rethink everything. And so by focusing on every detail and putting it together, so far we've been able to build profitable, cash flow positive, higher paying jobs through the foundries.
No, I love that. And there's two things about your partnership that cracks me up, and he actually just booked today. I'll have him on next month. But y'all don't do meetings, which I love, because like I'm even though I'm very disciplined, I'm the anti guy. If it's not on my schedule, it's kind of like, hey, things happen, right? So that's the first thing I love. But more importantly, like it feels like, obviously you could tell if you're financial modeling at the age you were, you're extremely detail oriented and extremely ops focused on what you do. It takes a certain type of trust and responsibility and ownership for you to take his, your partner, but for you to take his thing and kind of let him do his thing and let him do the process to that obviously is some getting to know each other first. But did y'all click just like that right off the bat and kind of found your places?
We did actually. I think the first thing that was mentioned was I forget what he said. He said, "Come on up and check out the foundry or whatever." And I said, I'm not really looking to work with anybody. I'm kind of done consulting. And I made a comment, and I was like, "Well, if you drive me around some fall foliage and put on some Sinatra and we can grab a cigar," I said, "it'll be worth a trip up." And he goes, "Oh, I think we're going to get along." And we legit put on Sinatra and hung out and smoked cigars within 2 days of that call. And I was up there. And just, from that, I forget how he says it, but I'll say we're two sides of the same coin. We have a ton of similarity in who we are outside of work, and we have a ton of polarity who we are inside of work. So together we're focused on the same mission. We're like the same person. We often say the same thing at the same time. It's kind of funny shooting it back and forth when both of our messages hit and it's like the same thing. But in work, he is a very big picture. He needs to chew on things for a long time and think about it. I'm a little more tactical. I'm going to get to the bottom of it. And so when you put those together, you've got like a fully formed, kind of exec level, and that just works well. We stay each other's way. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. And I have no ego around that. I'm happy to just call Reg and say, "Hey, here's what I need done." And he's happy to call me and say, "Hey, here's what I need done." And just pass stuff off and trust each other that he's going to do some things better than me and vice versa. I think high trust, low ego. If you can do that, you can do a lot of cool things.
And what I want to talk today with you about right now is like ops, right? Like I think with the way the economy is, the market, just the interest rates, everything we're in, I think this next period of time is really going to be an operation point of view. Like it is down and dirty. It's war. You're spending time with him and your team sometimes more than you even spend time with your family because you're in it. You're growing. When you look at the landscape of business, like what are the aspects of a business owner or CEO that they're missing the boat over and over again when it comes to operations?
Yeah, this is coming up a lot lately. So much so that I've started recording answers to a lot of the questions I'm getting in Loom, and I'm up to about 50. I was just telling Reg earlier. I was on the phone with him. I got like 50 to 65 to 10-minute bites on this with visuals. What I'm seeing is, one, they don't do it on purpose. So I'm going to say this, and I know anybody listening to be like, "Oh, that's not me." But they run status quo. They get into a business like this is the way they're doing it. They'll change some things, but there's not a hard, detailed overview of how we do everything and a questioning of it. And that really needs to be done. So much has changed in the world just in the last 10 years. Like so much has changed. Tools available, expectation of customers, cost of things. Like we can't run at the same cost levels. We can't run at the same speed levels. You've got to use new tools and new ideas and new ways. You have to shift expectations. And so it's hard to put this in one bucket. To me, it's one thing, but I can't think of the wording. But for example, I was troubleshooting with a company just yesterday. I was out in Orlando, and they've got an issue where they overpack on some items and they underpack on some items, right? It's trying to, if we can forecast perfectly, we can not have to have the wrong package level. If they pack too much, what happens is then they have to waste time unpacking if an order comes in for a different type. And if they pack too little, then they got to hurry up and pack that before the order goes out. So no matter what, they're wasting time. And so what I see most people do is they like try to optimize that. Well, let's try and minimize, let's find the right packing level of every single part, and then we'll pack it just to the right amount. Think bigger, zoom out. Why are we packing them at all? Why aren't we packing them until we need to pack them? Well, because that customer only gives us an order a day ahead of time. Why are they giving it to us a day ahead of time? Well, because that's what they've always done. Well, can we call them and tell them that we're going to do a week ahead of time? No, they won't do it. Okay, great. Let's move to a VMI system. Now we control and we know the data. We can go in a week early and know like it's going to be better service for that. And you just keep like sometimes the solve isn't at the point of the problem. It's at a totally different area. And then you solve that and it changes all these downstream things. That higher level tactical implementation, I do not see that often. I see a lot of people just attacking the problem at the point, and what they end up is what I call scar tissue. You end up with band-aids and these weird solutions that technically solve the problem, but it's like not quite in the right way, and it's going to make another problem maybe not quite as big, and you just got scar tissue everywhere. And then none of them actually align to what I call the strategic access line. So this is a line that goes from mission straight through to what you continuously do every day and the language that you use. And it goes through annual planning. It goes through all this stuff. So you have this line that's all kind of zigzaggy instead of straight up and down. That's the first thing is they're not really great at solving the problems in the correct way that is thinking 20 years out. The second thing that I see a lot is accountability. Okay, so you have this plan. So many people are afraid to hold people accountable or don't know how to hold people accountable. Holding somebody accountable is not pointing out their mistakes and rubbing their nose in it. It is not telling them that they're shitty. And it's not avoiding them and not having a conversation because you're afraid to have the tough conversation. There is a middle ground where you respect them, you build them up through accountability, but there is a clear, accountable thing to do. And we need to hold that. And that is where I see so many places crash. You know, the manager kind of knows what needs to be done. Yeah, I told them once a quarter, we tell them, but there's no thread that threads accountability for the annually to the quarterly to what we're doing daily. It doesn't always have to be numbers, but there's just no accountability. Maybe only the manager does it. Team leads don't. So yeah, if you could set up your strategic access line and you could have way better accountability, those are the two big needle movers. I mean, think about a business. To be successful, you need to produce cash. If you have a good plan, that plan hopefully ends in positive cash flow. So you just got to meet that plan. Well, how do you meet? So design the right plan. And then how do you get to that plan? You hold the right people accountable to that plan. If you can do that, right people doing the right thing, and that thing ends up with positive cash flow, like mathematically, you have to have good cash flow. You have to have a good business. You just have to nail those three things, which are obviously very big things, right? The right people, the plan, and the strategic access line, like doing the right thing.
That's why I wanted to have them on, guys. You just heard a masterclass of how I love it. I mean, dude, that's my thing, because I read a book called The Private Equity Playbook by Adam Coffey, and he says he's built $3 billion plus companies, and they had 50,000 machine washers, and they were breaking the axles on the vans because the coins were so heavy. And he said, well, why don't we have cards? And they go, well, this is just the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
He changed the cards, and then everybody was fine, and the axles didn't break on the truck anymore.
I love it. So I have notes for this day one speech, and I just reviewed them because I gave it to somebody. And one of the notes is, and you got to set this up correctly, is that conversation. I do not want to ever hear it's the way we've always done it. I don't want to hear this is the way it's done. And so to set that up, what I say is, hey, you know what? Our goal is to be number one, and then define that niche, whatever it is. Small for us, small non-ferrous foundries in the U.S. Those are the constraints. We want to be number one there. Anybody raise your hand? Are we number one today? Oh, everybody, nope, we're not. Okay, so I'm just going to walk this back. Every decision we've made, every process we have, everything we do up till now has not made us number one. I can guarantee you it is not going to magically make us number one next year, which means we have to change what we're doing here in order to be number one. And now to be number one means we have to do it better than everybody. That's the top level. So we can't just change it. We have to make it better. We have to raise the bar. So we're going to raise the bar on service. We're going to raise the bar on production, on quality, on hiring. We're going to raise the bar everywhere. It's going to get harder. We're going to do the hard work to be number one. So when we talk about changing things out, I promise you, I never want to hear it's the way we've always done it. Every other foundry does it this way. That's too hard, because I just got rid of all those excuses for you. I know it's going to be hard. I know no one does it this way. Our goal is number one. To get there, we have to do it number one. And I'm excited to build the number one company with you, because I'm going to benefit and you're going to benefit. And then I break down exactly how they benefit. We get into P&L, we get into the new bonus structure, and we, again, that access line, direct from here's what we're doing to your pocket. And we draw that line and connect it and make it very tactical for them. So yeah, 100%. We don't want to do it the same way. I'm glad nobody does it this way. It means we're onto something. We're going to have an edge.
Yeah, I want to share another one with you because you love this stuff from the same book, same company. They had laundromats everywhere. They had tons. I mean, the most you've ever seen, $1 billion worth. And each maintenance guy, had 35 keys. So they had a key for each room, and there was a big key room. And if that guy was off, like, he knew muscle memory, but he tried to do it one day, and it took him like all day just to, check machines. And so he asked somebody back at the main office. He said, "Why do we do this?" He said, "Well, the pickpockets were really bad." And he goes, "When was that?" And they go, 1950. And he goes, when's the last time somebody was pickpocketed? And they go, "Oh, it's been 50 years. Well, why do we do it this way?" So he changed everything to one key, and they gained 50% efficiency in their business.
100%. I was at one of our plants, and man, a lot of looking smart is just asking really stupid questions, honestly. I had one of our guys be like, "I love when you come because you rethink everything." And I told him, I was like, "Hey, bud, I haven't rethought a thing. All I've done is ask really obvious questions." So, he said it's a guy who's in purchasing, and he's like, I have to make sure that I print and I type up all these quality certificates for all the shipments. I'm like, "Why are you typing up quality certificates?" He goes, "Well, the shipping computer can't." I was like, "Why can't we get a shipping computer that can?" He's like, "Well, I don't know." He's like, "Oh, we did. But the plant manager didn't get it all installed yet." I go, "Why is the plant manager installing computers? He has a way bigger job. We can just get an IT person for $150 to come in." And it's like just a lot of stupid questions. By the time we were done, for $150 and 2 hours of labor, we moved that to where it should have been, the quality department, which freed up procurement to not get called in every day, which was happening. He was getting called in every day for shipments. And I'm like, guys, just ask the stupid questions and then solve them. I didn't do anything other than ask the obvious question: why is this guy who's supposed to be on the floor doing this in here typing up quality certs when it has nothing to do with quality or shipping or the customer or certifications or anything to do with it? And it's always, that's more scar tissue. That's more fixes at the point and instead of, or just being cheap and not paying the $150. But I guarantee you we wasted way more than $150 with that guy walking around not doing his job.
At some point, if something happens over and over again and the problem isn't fixed, you're the problem. That's what I had to realize in my big Airbnb business. I'm like, wow, you're complaining about this problem, and you're going, wait, the only common denominator here is me.
Me.
Just fix it. So if people want to, you have a great newsletter and other stuff and great content on X. How would they do that?
So you can get my newsletter by just going to my site, joshuaschultz.com. I try to put that out every week, try to be really tactical about it and make sure I'm not giving you fluff. And then, I'm on X, just Joshua M. Schultz on X. Again, I try to be tactical, share things that are helpful. I try to stay on point so you don't get a lot of fluff, although my sarcasm comes out once in a while on there, more with friends that know I'm being sarcastic and don't take me too seriously. But yeah.
No, it's a great newsletter, guys. Definitely check it out. Send it to a friend, share this episode with somebody, and we'll see you next time, guys. Thank you.